Hi, I'm Carly McAvoy. Today I'm talking about writing equations to solve word problems. And in these equations, we're comparing three things. So we have to write algebraic expressions for all three of them and then set up an equation using those expressions. So this one says three sisters plan to split $5,200. Marley gets 3 times as much as Sydney, and Tanya gets 100 more than twice what Sydney gets. How much does each person get? So everybody's getting something that's based on Sydney. So I'm going to say that the dollars that Sydney gets is S. And the dollars, who's our next person, that Marley gets, well, she gets 3 times as much as Sydney, so do you agree we would just say 3S? We don't want 3 different variables, we want 1 variable. And then the dollars that Tanya gets, well, she gets $100 more than twice what Sydney gets. So she gets 2S plus 100. So those are the 3 different expressions that we're going to use, and those 3 expressions are going to add up to be $5,200. So we're going to say what Sydney gets, and what Marley gets, and what Tanya gets. Those 3 expressions add up to $5,200. Maybe you can see here that I can just subtract 100 from both sides and add up all the S's. So I have 2 and 3 are 5, plus 1 more is 6, so I have 6S. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 6. And that's going to give me 850. If you're not positive, then turn your calculator on and check it. 5,100 divided by 6 is 850. So this $850 represents what? Well, it represents what Sydney's going to make because Sydney was our base variable S. So Sydney gets $850. Notice that I go back to where I declared them and then put the answer there. If you don't do that, then you need to declare it again because your final answer should be very clear on who gets 850, who gets the next amount and the next amount. Now remember, Marley got 3 times this. So for Marley, we would take 3 times 850 because she got 3 times as much as Sydney. So then we would just take 850 times 3 and find out that that's 2,550. It doesn't matter if you can't see my calculator. I'm just doing these simple calculations there. And then how am I going to figure out what Tanya makes? Well, Tanya makes 2 times what Sydney made, but then another 100 after that. So she's going to make 850 times 2 plus 100, or $1,800. Now, this is my answer. And you can see that I'm saying Sydney gets 850, Marley gets, Tanya gets, but I could quickly add these up as well just to make sure that they added up to, what should they add up to? They should add up to $5,200 because that's what we said they were going to split. Okay, and the next one, it's similar. There's 3 people and they all bought cars. Jeff, Eric, and Gary each bought a used car, and Jeff spent 150 more than half as much as Gary. Eric spent 450 less than twice what Gary spent, and they spent $16,450 altogether. So hopefully you can see that our base variable, or the thing that everything else is based on, is Gary. So we're going to say the dollars that Gary spent is G. And then we have to figure out what's the dollars that Jeff spent. And then what's the dollars that Eric spent. So I'm declaring my 3 unknowns first. Now Jeff spent 150 more than half of what Gary spent. So half of what Gary spent would be 1/2 G. But then 150 more than that would be plus 150. I always wanted to describe everything using one variable. And then Eric spent 450 less than twice what Gary spent. So twice what Gary spent, but then $450 less than that. So here's what I have. I have Gary, and I have Jeff, and I have Eric. These expressions describe what each of them spent. Didn't leave very good room. I'm going to come over here. And that was $16,450. That's what they spent. So if I simplify this over here, I have 1G and 2G's is 3G plus a half is 3.5 G. And then I have 150 minus 450, which is minus 300. And then I can add 300 to both sides. And that gives me 16,750. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 3.5. Now I have 3.5 up there, but I know that 0.5 and 1/2 are exactly equivalent. It's not like I had to round to do that. If it was a 1/3 or something that would cause rounding, I would not round it. I wouldn't change it to a decimal, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. 16,750 divided by 3.5 gives me $4,785.71. Okay, rounded to the nearest cent, which we do when we deal with money. 4,785. Now, that is the amount that Gary spent. So I'm going to come over here and say Gary spent $4,785.71. There's a reason that I use variables that help me remember what I found. Next, I want to say what Jeff spent. Jeff spent half of that plus 150. So I can take that amount, divide by 2, and then add 150, and that tells me 2,542.86. 42.86. And then what Eric spent, well, you have to take what Gary spent, 4,785.71, and then times it by 2, and then subtract 450, and that's 9121.42. So there's my 3 answers, and I would add those up to check to make sure they all added up to 16,450. All right. At the time that a 3-generation picture was taken, Lon was 22 years younger than her mother. Her grandmother was 10 less than twice her mother's age. How old were the 3 women if the sum of their ages was 167? Everything is based around the mother. So I'm going to say the mother's age was M. And Lon's age was M minus 22 because she was 22 years younger. And Grandma's age was 10 less than twice the mother's age, 2M minus 10. And then I'm going to add those together, M and M minus 22 and 2M minus 10, and they all add up to 176. So M plus M plus I don't know why I put a minus there. So this is the mother's age, Lon's age, and the grandmother's age. They all add up. So I had a moment there where I was like, wait. And when something like that happens, this is a good little teaching moment. So I just about said M plus M minus 2M. That's no M's. And I wouldn't be able to solve this equation without a variable. And so I knew that I had done something wrong. It just took me a minute to figure it out. Don't panic and abandon ship and the first time you encounter a mistake. try to figure out, well, what is it that's wrong here, and see if you can fix it. Okay, so I have 4m minus 32, minus 22 and minus 10. And then I can add 176 plus 32. And that's 208. And then divide both sides by 4, and that's m equals 52. And then you can say, well, what is m? Well, that m is the mother's age. So the mother's age is 52 years. And Lon is 30 years old because 52 minus 22. And how old is the grandma? Well, she's 2 times 52 minus 10. So that's 104 minus 10, or 94. So there's my answer. And I can always add those up to make sure they add up to 176 in this case. All right, have a fantastic day.